Hi, everyone, and welcome to Cultivating Business. I'm Kevin McLaughlin, Managing Director with Centri Consulting, where I lead our cannabis practice. Very excited for our guest today. He's extremely well known and respected within the cannabis community. Our guest is the founder of Hauser Advisory, Marc Hauser. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about the cannabis industry.
Absolutely. And for all our viewers, Marc's a recovering attorney and somewhat recently opened up his own shop, providing various services to folks within the cannabis industry. So maybe a good place to start, Marc, is tell us a little bit about your background, and then really what you're doing as part of your new endeavor here.
Thanks. Yeah, I was until last summer, I was a deal and capital markets lawyer for 24 years. I focused on all aspects of transactions. For 15 years of that, I was in-house as personal deal counsel to Chicago-based investor Sam Zell. Most recently, I was at Reed Smith, a global law firm with over 1,800 lawyers, as head of the cannabis practice team, as a partner there. And I focused my entire practice on the cannabis space. We represented MSOs, startups, ancillary businesses, funds, investors, lenders, REITs, everybody that we could, to advise on the space. And last summer, I decided I would quit practicing law and instead start up a consulting business focused on the industry, advising on transactions and sort of life cycle events, as well as advising people on how to engage with the industry.
Awesome. And I know you've hit the ground running, so congrats again, and excited to see how you continue to grow here. And I think as we shift into our discussion here, let's start with a pretty hot topic, and one that I think will really continue to be a focus within the space, for many years. But I want to get your thoughts on how you see capital markets and raising capital playing out specifically in 2023, as that's certainly been a hot topic.
So 2023 is going to be an interesting year. I mean, certainly, 2022 wasn't exactly easy for the industry, between not really making any progress on the federal level, despite, the hopes of many. And even though there really wasn't much, to me, it was a lot of hype, and there wasn't much evidence that it was actually really going to happen with respect to safe banking. But capital markets were still pretty much dead in the water for most companies in 2022, and I don't see that changing in 2023. And based upon my conversations with folks across the industry, I don't think they see it really changing either, unless there's some outside catalyst that none of us can really predict.
No, absolutely. It's status quo. Again, you never know how things play out. Things can certainly shift and pivot, but always interested to get insights there.
Yeah.
We hear quite a bit about distressed assets, restructuring, et cetera, those types of areas. And there's certainly opportunities in the market for those. How do you see that impacting the ability to raise capital when there's potential opportunity, like new investors? Or what's your thoughts there on that playing out from a distressed asset and its impact on capital markets and raising capital?
I should preface this that none of what I'm saying is investment advice, and it's definitely not legal advice. Even though I am still technically a lawyer, but I'm not a broker dealer or an investment advisor. But it's always hard to predict what's going to happen. But the distress in the market is there's the big problem that you have in the cannabis industry is that bankruptcy is not available. The bankruptcy courts made it clear a couple of years ago that plant touching companies that are directly involved in directly sort of handling cannabis products can't file for bankruptcy because it's still federally illegal, and the bankruptcy code doesn't provide for an illegal business to take advantage of bankruptcy. And so that really throws everything out the window. And so companies can't get that sort of protection. So litigation isn't stayed, and claims can't be sort of dealt with. That on top of just the fact that it's extraordinarily hard for these companies to make money and have positive net income due to the high, everything being expensive as a cannabis industry, plus taxes being extremely high, not only because of state and local taxes, but also the effects of the federal tax code and a particular provision, Section 280E, which limits severely the number of federal deductions, or the amount of federal deductions. So you've got companies that are constantly burning cash, that are high growth mode, and can't raise money. And so that's a lot of where the distress is coming from. And so, where the opportunity lies is, part of the problem is that you can't really do a loan to own strategy in this space. Buying the fulcrum security of, let's say, a senior or mezzanine tranche of debt, which is sort of a typical, debt strategy in distressed investing, it doesn't really work because you can't take the thing through bankruptcy and clear it out. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean it can't be done, because you basically have to come to an agreement with the existing shareholders, but it's a lot harder to pull off. And also then very much more expensive to pull off as well, if you can even buy the debt. You also have the problem of, all right, so let's say we're going to make distressed loans to this company, but rates are already very high for these companies, and they're at, a lot of companies are having trouble servicing that debt, even at, with rates in, the average rate for a non-public, or public but smaller MSO is, these were in the high teens. Some of the very large credits are in, the low single digits, but that's, I think that's pretty rare. And it'll be interesting to see whether, the single digit rates that they were getting the past 2 years sort of come back. But my point, I guess my broader point is that if companies are having trouble servicing their debt at sort of prevailing rates, lending to them at a higher rate, it doesn't really get you very far.
No, you're in the same predicament almost, right? You're not really changing much if it's still at those high teen rates.
That's right. And then, on the equity side, everybody in this space would love more equity capital, but the capital that really sort of flooded into the market in 2017 to sort of early 2019 just really hasn't come back, because so many of those companies got burned, unfortunately, with just outsized valuations, unrealistic valuations based upon sort of potential for this industry. There was a bit of a spurt in early 2021, sorry, mm-hmm. When the Democrats won the Senate, and there was sort of a flurry of belief that could mean turn into legalization, but that sort of fell apart, and so it really just it never transpired, and equity investors were burned, and the pool of capital is fairly limited by the fact that a lot of most institutional capital can't touch this industry because it's illegal. So it's not only hard to find, But even there, it's, it also then becomes extraordinarily expensive because investors can get away with that.
Mm-hmm.
But for the, for the faint of heart, or sorry, for those who are not faint of heart, I should say, that's the wrong, there's an incredible amount of opportunity out there because everybody needs the money and everybody's willing to, to take it in order to get stuff done and survive. But, the challenge is finding the right opportunity.
No, absolutely. And to your point, valuations were sky high 2 years ago. They're the exact opposite now, right? So there's still, I believe there's value, but it's a matter of finding that investor that can get through all the other challenges and shift into something that I think piggybacks off that question nicely. A real world example. Recently, Lowell Farms announced that it's pursuing strategic alternatives to maximize shareholder value. From your perspective, what's a scenario that a company in a similar place can pivot to add shareholder value or investor value? Again, this is a theoretical, but it's, I think, something that we'll see as we look 2023 and beyond. For some of these businesses that have to look to that strategic alternative type route.
I think it's I think it means consolidation. I think it just means merging with somebody else who has some dry powder to help for the future, because strategic alternatives, when I read that, I think bankruptcy. It's sort of code, and I know that's sort of a cynical way of looking at it, but it sort of suggests like some things, you're not announcing that if things are going swimmingly. And so, but bankruptcy is generally it's not available in the US. And you had Flower One filed for bankruptcy up in Canada recently, or before the new year, and they recently closed it, and the lenders took all of the stock, and the public shareholders were completely wiped out. But that was a pretty rare situation, because based upon their particular capital structure, in a way that I think most US MSOs really can't take advantage of. So that's sort of an aside, but overall, yeah, I think it means that they're going to try to find somebody to buy them. And because that's really all they can do. I mean, I guess they could shut down, but that's unlikely because those assets still have real value. But it's a matter of finding somebody who has enough dry powder to take on the existing liabilities and either renegotiate them or pay them off, and buy those assets, which also is Lowell is public. And so it makes it a lot harder to do that, because everything with being a public company is harder and more expensive. And so it's an interesting challenge there, but I suspect we're going to see more and more of that this year, these sort of distressed M&A, because it's really sort of the only way, certain companies can be able to survive.
No, absolutely right. It might be pennies on the dollar, or not necessarily the exit or plan that the company envisioned, but beats the alternative, and I think puts you in an opportunity to pivot and get some value, given the current market. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I don't think that's the first one of those types of scenarios that we'll see, in 2023 and beyond, and it'll, again, be an interesting year for that. I always like to close with this. I'm not going to hold you to it, but what's a prediction you have for cannabis in 2023? And if it's something positive, that'd be great, because we're hearing a lot about challenges and things like that. But again, not holding you to this, but would love to get a prediction for you as we look for the next 11, 12 months here in 2023.
This may be wishful thinking, but I think that people are going to start from a deal and sort of financial perspective. I think people are going to start moving away from and also I apologize, this is a little wonky, but people are going to start moving away from valuing these companies on an EBITDA basis. I think it's particularly as companies have been the revenues are down and margins are tightening. Everybody EBITDA is when things were good 2 years ago, companies had EBITDA, and so it was it was sort of a decent way of looking at it. But over time, you look at the way adjustments are done. Everybody reports on adjusted EBITDA, and there's no consistency on what those adjustments are. And that it's not atypical for a company to report adjusted EBITDA, but it's a lot of companies take a lot of liberty in the number of adjustments, and plus the fact that the effects of taxes in this industry are so dramatic, particularly the effects of 280E, that EBITDA is not really that useful a metric relative to any other business. Because just because you've EBITDA doesn't mean that you're not burning cash like crazy. And so it's it's just, I don't know what the alternative is. That's why I'm not an investment banker, but I am. That's what we have people like you for, or financial people. But it's but I think that it's, the more I talk to people, the more I'm hearing that it's just becoming, people are realizing that it's not really a great tool at this time to look at the actual value of these companies. And so I think its usefulness will start to diminish, and people will start to think about other more sort of valuable ways of valuing these companies.
And I think that's a great point, right? It's the measure that's typically used, right, as part of the M&A process, or just valuation and whatnot. But I think current state and environment and industry is a little different with some of the regulatory challenges, and I don't have to go over that laundry list. So I think that's a very good point, and something to think about as we look forward here. Well, Marc, thanks so much for joining. Loved hearing from you and getting some of your knowledge on the industry. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks. And I would add, if anybody has any questions and wants to reach out to me, my website is Hauser Advisory, Hauser advisory.com. And there you can subscribe to my Cannabis Musings newsletter, which I've been writing for over 4 years now on a semi-weekly basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone, if you don't, give it a read. I'm a weekly reader, and it's extremely informative, and I think is a good way to keep up with what's happening in a continuous environment here. So thanks again, Marc, and thanks everybody for tuning in today, and join us on next month's episode in February of Cultivating Business.
Thanks for having me.